everyone, and welcome to the Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. Shadows, the ones cast by ourselves or other objects, they seem innocent enough, right? But have you ever given much thought to what your shadow actually is? Maybe it's nothing, or maybe it's actually a part of you. Many cultures place high value on shadows. Some believe you can actually harm a person through its shadow or trap their spirit. Is it possible when you're encountering a shadow being, you're actually experiencing the manifestation of a trapped soul? I'd like to think not, but there's always been something rather foreboding about shadows, regardless of their form. Because it's fun to make shadow puppets with your hands, but the ones cast on your walls, in your room, without your participation, those feel a little less innocent. Those just might scare you. So, let's get started, shall we? Hey there, I'm a night janitor at a hospital and I spend most of my time at work listening to creepypasta narrations. But I've recently found this channel and I thought it would be fun to send in one of my stories about this place. We've got plenty of ghosts, but after working here a while, you get used to them. For the most part, no one's ever experienced anything malicious, just the friendly or curious types of spirits. In the 5 years I've been working there, only one incident has really frightened me, and it just happened last week. One of the places I'm responsible for cleaning is the morgue. We recently had a man pass away after a late-night motorcycle accident, and his body was still on one of the tables when I went in to clean. It's not uncommon for a few to be left out. If there's no one on duty to check them in, the orderlies will leave them for whoever has the morning shift. It's not really like the movies where a head and toe tag are sticking out of each sheet, at least not at our hospital. Those sheets are plenty big enough to cover the whole body, so it's not quite as creepy as you see on TV. Well, not usually. I saw the motorcycle guy as soon as I walked in, and his sheet had fallen to the side, leaving his face and part of his chest exposed. Now, I have a pretty strong stomach. You have to in order to work here, but this guy was messed up. I nearly puked when I saw his face. He only had one eye left, and it stared at me with the little skin left around it. I quickly pulled the sheet back over him, and I went back to work. When I turned to leave, the sheet had not only fallen halfway down his face again, its head was turned to the side, still looking at me. There's no draft or fans blowing in the morgue. Not a single thing could have moved that sheet. I pulled it back over the man for a second time and ran out of there like a scared child. By the time I woke up the following afternoon, I felt pretty silly. What did I know about dead bodies anyway? And that one was so messed up. Who's to say it wasn't just settling or whatever corpses do? I chat with the doctors often, so I wanted to ask that night, but I never quite worked up the nerve. Each way I imagined saying it just made me feel crazy. Either it was a completely normal occurrence that scared me for no reason, or it wasn't normal, and they would think that I'd lost my mind. That's certainly a more logical conclusion than a dead man was watching me. When I made it back to the morgue, I was relieved to see no bodies were left, and set about my work. As I was emptying the trash, I began to hear a soft scratching sound, like something hard scraping a metal surface. I couldn't stand the idea of wondering about it too, so I followed the sound to the freezer drawers. I'm sure you've seen them on TV, the wall of big square cubicles where the bodies are stored until claimed by family. They have metal tables that slide in and out. Yeah, I'm sure you know. It took all of my courage to look inside. The first two were empty. but I finally found the right one on my third try. As soon as the door was open, the noise immediately stopped. I had to know if it was the same guy from yesterday. So I pulled out the body just to peek at his face and had to stifle a scream when I saw an exposed hand sitting atop the white sheet. Most of its flesh was gone, likely removed while sliding down the highway, because it was definitely the motorcycle guy again. I was genuinely sick to my stomach when I confirmed it by viewing his face. His fingers were nothing but bone, which would have been perfect for making the sound I heard. Not wanting to be in there another second, I quickly put everything back as I found it and got the hell out of there. But just as I was exiting, the noise started again. I didn't stop to see how long it lasted. I got back upstairs and didn't say a word to anyone. Thankfully, I was off for the next 2 days, but I do have to go back tonight. Even though the body is probably gone by now, I still have an overwhelming sense of dread. Honestly, I may call in sick. I really can't decide. I should say firstly that I've never harmed any living creature for pleasure. I do have blood on my hands, mostly from my service in the military when I was a younger man. PTSD never goes away. It's an uncontrollable, unconscious reaction from a lifetime of memories lived by another man, a young and naive man, the husk I grew to emerge from. When I discarded my old shell, talks of it could reanimate the corpse to dance in vivid memories so real you'd swear you were there again. Memories I have no interest in revisiting, but I believe prefacing this is necessary in order for the next part to fully make sense. After discharge, I was still active in the Ready Reserve for a few more years. My first wife, Jackie, and I fell in love with the suburbs of DC. Jackie was a nurse at the Veterans Hospital. I would struggle to hold down stable employment through the first year as a civilian. My mind was damaged, and I was barely functioning. The worst episode occurred when I was working at a Safeway. I was on a knee opening boxes of milk to start stocking in a big refrigeration unit. The cooling fans in there are loud. A coworker walks up behind me to put something in the refrigerator. I don't notice her, but she accidentally knocks over a jar and it explodes. The noise startled me so much that it had triggered a flashback, and I black out. Blacking out is something unreal. At first, my eyes were fixed on brown cardboard. Through the holes, the rows of gold-capped glass jars, each filled with white milk, that would clink and slosh around as I pulled them out. Then, in the blink of an eye, I realize I'm standing. My coworker's back is pressed against my chest. My left arm was holding her like a bear hug, while in my right hand was a box cutter. The door to the refrigeration unit is opened, and in the doorway, shoppers are staring in. In front of them, my boss has his hands up and is walking towards me. My ears fully dial back into frequency, and everything hit me all at once. I instantly released the woman and dropped the box cutter. I was lucky not to have gone to prison that day. They decided not to call the police. My boss served in World War II. He understood the horrors of war, but he could also see that I wasn't fit for normal life yet. As I scrambled to find other work, the offer that we'd previously put down on a house had finally been accepted. Thankfully, Jackie was smart enough with money. She'd stashed away the money in a coffee tin under her vanity for months. We had just enough to move in, but in order for us to continue our residency, I needed to find a job fast. The first couple of months after moving in were the most stressful and put the most strain on me and Jackie's marriage. We did everything in our power to make the house feel like a home, but it just never did. Even with the heat up and the lights on, the cold, dark energy was inescapable. I was drained every morning because I'd be plagued by night terrors almost every night. The dreams I had were also no longer amidst the backdrop of North Vietnam. Instead, the setting began to resemble home, visions of my neighborhood after a catastrophic disaster. The sky above is colored orange from a glow of distant fires, and violence fills the street as neighbors turn on one another for resources. Internalizing my trauma was the worst thing that I could have done for myself in my relationship, but we were both increasingly stressed, both at our breaking points. I kept it from Jackie, in fear of becoming more of a burden in her eyes, further scrutinizing my sanity and ability to provide a stable household. Soon enough, the night terrors would reach a level I've never experienced. I began to question if I was awake or asleep when they decided to haunt me. In our bedroom, we had a walk-in closet with sliding doors. I was reading a book late one night when I heard the wooden doors of the closet quietly rattle. I looked up to see them both gently slide open. I got chills like never before, and the hair stood up on the back of my neck, then my whole body. I'm staring into the closet. The shade of darkness grows deeper the further back my eyes try to focus. Then, from the floor up, the blackest of colors inside the closet begins to morph and take shape, eating every ounce of reflecting light. It resembled a slow-rising plume of smoke, or vines, as it started to grow into a human shape. The figure was female, and the smoke she grew from continued to fall through the ground like an endless dress. I did the only thing that I thought I could do, the only thing that I used to do when I'd see images of war, and that was to close my eyes tight, try to fall asleep before they became too real. I'd come to find out that that was only the entity introducing herself to me. She would be a fixture in my peripherals during the day and night. I would see her take form in the corners of the room, but I would never interact or look over. She looked like what I used to see during active duty. The ghosts of men you killed in battle that day follow you on your march back to the barracks. With the moon at our backs, our shadows in front of us would be joined by other shadows. Sometimes you could outrun them. Sometimes they'd run with you. Observations everyone in the platoon experienced, but didn't always share out loud. The first winter Jackie and I spent in our house was bitterly cold. A new pipe would burst seemingly once a week, and I'd have to crawl under the house to fix it. I hated getting down there in the crawl space. That's when I'd be tormented by this female entity. I could feel her crawling around with me, faster than I could move. My flashlight would catch her as I swiveled for tools. I'd suppress my fear just enough to keep my hands from shaking as I finished the job. Then, that same winter, we receive a call from Jackie's sister. She'd sustained a pretty extensive injury slipping on ice. Jackie would need to stay with her through the new year to help out. Jackie had to catch 2 buses to get to work every day. She and I would talk on the phone every night, and I would visit her on lunch breaks, but it wasn't the same. We missed each other more than we knew. Ironically, I think this time apart made us appreciate each other more. I filled my time with odd jobs around town, doing my best to stay out of the house as long as I could, before having to return in the evening. I was alone, but I wasn't. It was impossible not to feel like I was constantly being stalked within the confines of my home. Out the window, I watched my neighbors hang up Christmas lights without a care in the world. The gutters and doors of my house remained bare. No wreath, no tree, no decorations. There was no point in wasting the effort if I was going to be the only one pretending to enjoy it. With Jackie coming home for the new year, I decided to stop feeling sorry for myself and spruce the place up a little bit. I picked up some candles that were festively scented, some new blankets for the couch, all of our favorite foods. It was important to ring in the new year correctly, I thought. However, once Jackie got home, she told me that being with her sister had been stressful, yes, but she also felt relief. Relief from her night terrors, relief from the shadows. At first, she thought that I was offended because I hadn't said a word, but I wasn't offended. I completely understood. I told her as much, finally, and then we officially started swapping stories. I learned her dreams were slightly different from mine. She described chaos similar to mine, but also personal nightmares like losing a limb, watching me die horrific deaths over and over. The most unsettling, yet reaffirming of all, she also described the same figure, and she confirmed she'd seen the figure while she was awake. She was folding clothes in the living room, watching TV, but she had that intense feeling like she was being watched. Glancing towards the hallway, she focused on the darkness, feeling that it was darker than it should be. Then she saw it. The black plume formed the shape of a woman, cloaked in continuous darkness. Jackie said she froze and just closed her eyes tightly, praying that it would go away. When she opened her eyes, it was gone. Being at her sister's, she said, it felt as though a giant weight had been lifted. She believed the weight to be our house. We both couldn't believe that we kept it from one another, but I guess I understand it from both sides. At first I thought we felt better, having it all out in the open. We were motivated to try and figure out what to do about this feeling, what to do about the house. And I wish that we'd made it that far, but for several reasons. Some I can explain, others I can't. Everything really did start to fall apart. Our careers, the house, our relationship itself. We had no time to do much of anything except for work and try to get some sleep in between doing so. Night terrors continued. Shadows intensified, manifesting in more places than just the closets, the hallways, the corners. It was everywhere. This figure haunted us until we surrendered. Jackie and I ended up filing for divorce after we sold the house. There was no bitterness there, but we were both exhausted. We didn't stay close, but we ran into each other maybe 6 years after the divorce at a mutual friend's funeral. I wasn't going to bring it up, but Jackie did, asking me if I ever saw that figure again. Honestly, I hadn't thought about it. In fact, I was sure that I hadn't thought about it since the moment we sold that house. And she said the same thing. Until Jackie, I always assumed all of my nightmares were my own. Any horror I experienced, I assumed, was superficial or the result of recalling a more horrific time. Though I don't know exactly what we experienced, I at least know that I wasn't alone in that one. I'm a 38-year-old female, and I just lost my grandmother a few weeks ago. She was very sick at the end and required round-the-clock care. Our family doesn't have a whole lot of money, so my siblings and I took turns staying with her. Ultimately, I was the one on duty when she passed, and I was alone with her during those final hours. We'd had so many false alarms that we had all said our goodbyes multiple times and decided that there was no need to continue congregating every few days. For the first part, she wasn't entirely herself anymore anyway. Lucid moments were few and far between, and it caused her a great deal of stress to have a crowd of strangers hovering over her. That last night, however, well, I guess she seemed like herself. She recognized me and knew what year it was. She also remembered that Grandpa died 15 years ago, and that was usually her greatest area of confusion, so I thought she was fully lucid. She always said the best way to take her mind off the pain was good old-fashioned conversation. At the end, especially, her favorite thing to do was just to reminisce with one another. I was especially grateful for these moments. I learned so many things that I'd never known about her, like how she backpacked through Europe after college. You'd think that would be something that she spoke of more often, but she was a bit wild in those days, so I can understand why she wasn't eager to share that particular story with her grandchildren nonetheless. I really thought we were having a lovely moment, but then the conversation shifted to how she met my grandfather. Now, as far as I knew, she had a loving 53-year marriage to the sweetest, gentlest man in the world. He was one of those grandfathers that always slid you a candy when your parents weren't looking, and growing up, my siblings and I had all been very close with him. Whenever we stayed with our grandparents, they always seemed so in love. We definitely never saw them fight. I don't think we ever heard Pops raise his voice, so you can imagine my confusion when Nana's story went from our first date had been the best night of my life to I never dreamed that Satan himself was hiding behind those big hazel eyes. I couldn't believe my ears, but when I tried to speak, she cut me off. No, Brenda, I can't die with this on my conscience. Had she not used my name, or had her words not been so clear, I could have rested easy knowing that they were just mindless ramblings. But this was wholly unlike any of her past episodes. Her eyes were clear, her tone was sharp, and her expression was deadly serious. But her actual story was so foreign that I felt she was speaking another language. According to her, Pops was a cruel, selfish man who controlled every aspect of her life. From the day they said "I do," he alienated her from her friends and family before they had their first child, belittled her when they were alone, and became violent when he drank. But only with her, never the children. She wasn't allowed to have a job either. I'd always thought that she'd chosen to be a stay-at-home mother, but now she was claiming that Pops forbade her from having a career. When my mom and sister were kids, they loved Pops so much that she knew that they would blame her for a divorce, and she couldn't bear the thought of losing them. Bingo nights were one of Nana's few freedoms. For over 30 years, she went every Wednesday and most Sundays. Sometimes she would proudly display a random trifle that she'd won, but they were always small, simple prizes. I think the most expensive thing I saw her with was a $20 gift card for Outback Steakhouse. Well, little did I know that Nana was apparently a bingo legend. She played a lot of cards at once, and she often won. I would have never dreamed that you could win real cash prizes playing bingo, but apparently that's a thing. The most that she ever won was $500, but that was during a rare trip to the city. The games they hold in our area are done on a much smaller scale, but even so, she saved every penny of her winnings for over 30 years. By the end of it, she had almost $20,000 hidden away. The only problem was where she kept it. Nowadays, it's not that difficult to go out and open a secret bank account behind your spouse's back, but things were done differently when Nana had first started squirreling away her money. She didn't have anyone that she trusted enough to hide it for her. She was forced to use the shoebox method. It was hidden in the very back of her closet, buried beneath all the old junk that she could pile on top. Then came the day that Pops returned from work in a new car, one they definitely couldn't afford, and it was filled with presents for the children. Nana was immediately very nervous. She didn't know if he'd gotten a promotion, a new job, but his biggest highs were always followed with even bigger lows, and that one was shaping up to be a doozy. She had learned to play along when these things happened, at least until she could determine his true motives. He never did anything out of kindness. After the kids went to bed, he began pushing her buttons on purpose. You know that thing people do, they say things that they know will upset you, but they do it in a quote-unquote nice way. So when you do finally snap, they can act like you're the asshole. That's the situation she described. Nana was used to ignoring him when he did it, but this time, he kept bringing up her bingo nights, secrets, and lying. The more he talked, the more certain she became that he had found her money. And she was right. It was the worst night of her life, and the first time she ever gave serious consideration to just ending it all. But she had the kids to think about. On the other hand, she also knew that she would never find a way to get that much money again. Pops made damn sure that she never played another game of bingo. Finally, she decided that if her life was over anyway, she might as well take him with her. I don't want to say what she used because I have no idea what kind of people may be hearing this, and I can't live with contributing to a murder. But she poisoned his food every day for weeks until he became sick, so sick that he couldn't leave bed. Doctors tried a variety of treatments, but nothing seemed to help. Foul play was never even suspected because as far as anyone knew, including their own children, grandchildren, Pops and Nana had the perfect, loving marriage. In the end, he knew his time was almost up, and he refused to die in a hospital surrounded by doctors that he hated. Nana sat by his side, and only after the rest of the family had left did she confess her betrayal. She said the second Pop's eyes changed to reflect his understanding, his rage, was the proudest, happiest moment of her life. As she relayed this piece of the story, her eyes sparkled, and her scowl relaxed into a great, wide smile. And then she passed from this world. I truly don't know what to think about any of this. I haven't told anyone else because, well, how am I supposed to do that? Will they even believe me? I'm not sure if I even believe me. Seriously, I'm at a total loss here. Any advice would be greatly appreciated, and thank you in advance. Hi, I'm new here, and I don't normally enjoy spooky stuff, but my little sister is kind of obsessed, and she swore that this would be a safe place to share my story. I'm not even sure if it's a good one, but I'm getting pretty freaked out, and I feel like a nutbag when I try to tell my friends about it. I live in a small town where every other building has been named a historical landmark, so all the homes and businesses are extremely old. Many of the bigger houses downtown have been separated into individual apartments, including where I live. It would normally be too expensive for my pay grade, but the landlord offered me a deal that I couldn't refuse for taking the basement quarters. I figured that there was some gruesome murder story behind her generosity, but she said the reduction was to compensate for the lack of cell service. Apparently, all of the concrete does a bang-up job of blocking our reception, unless you leave your phone sitting on the window, which, don't forget, is a tiny rectangle under the ceiling because we're in a basement. But at the end of the day, I was desperate to get my own place, so I took it. I should also add that you can't gain access to any part of the building without knowing the gate code, so it's not like random people can just wander inside. Once you enter, the ground floor and upstairs apartments are in one direction, and the stairs for my place are tucked off to the left. There's nothing down there except for my apartment and an old storage closet, meaning there's no reason for anyone to be on those steps, except for myself and the maintenance man. Just a quick note about that guy. He's an elderly widow who doesn't even live in the building. He takes several days to come around here when there's a problem, and I've never seen him move faster than a snail. I'm not saying that he's not capable of it. I'm just saying it's extremely unlikely that he's responsible for my problems, considering it would be very difficult for him to come and go without being noticed. Each time he appears, every tenant swarms him. When you descend the basement stairs, there's a long hallway with the closet at the end, and my door is on the right about midway down. Every step you take, no matter how soft, echoes, so it's very hard to be stealthy, even if you want to be. Towards the end of my first week there, I was working on my laptop when I heard someone run down the stairs and through the hall. Thinking it must be a kid, I stuck my head out the door to chase them off. Only no one was there. It's a straight hallway. From my door, I have a clear view of each end, and nobody was there. They couldn't have left before I looked either. I'm positive the footsteps were on the closet end of the hall when I got the door open. Ultimately, I decided that it must have been someone upstairs, and I went back to work. After my first month in the apartment and having a few friends over, I became very accustomed to the difference in what it sounds like when someone is descending my steps or the ones above me. The difference in volume alone is unmistakable, but my stairs are also the only ones that make a loud echo. The second incident happened the night before Halloween. This time I heard someone scream before pounding their way down my steps and through the hall. I got to the door just as the steps were passing my apartment, but the second it opened, they vanished mid-stride. I even considered the possibility that they were hiding in the closet, but there were only cleaning supplies inside. Over the next couple of weeks, I put a great deal of effort into befriending one of the tenants. As it turns out, there are no kids living in my building. The lady in the attic apartment sometimes has her grandkids over, but they weren't visiting on either occasion I heard footsteps. It happened for a third time a few days ago. This was the worst one yet, and what prompted me to finally seek advice. There was no scream, but the footsteps sounded louder than ever, and instead of running past my door, they stopped right in front of it. My heart stopped dead in my chest when the banging began. I somehow found the courage to look through the peephole and saw a frightened young woman staring in the direction of the stairs as she continued her desperate knocking. I instantly forgot all about the possibility of ghosts or whatever spooky story I'd created in my mind. That girl was there, outside my door, terrified, but very real, until I actually yanked the door open, and no one was there. Again, there wasn't so much as a trace of the echo left from her insistent knocks. Also, there's no history of mental illness on either side of my family. That's probably a good thing to mention. I just don't understand. Is it possible for just the hallway to be haunted? Because nothing has ever happened inside my apartment, and the other tenants have sworn that they've never experienced anything strange in the building. I don't know. I'm at a loss. Part of me knows that I should try to learn if someone fitting her description has died here, but I really don't want to know the answer. Someone please just tell me what to do. Well, friends, it appears we've reached the end of tonight's episode. Thanks for joining me. Whether it's your first time or you're a regular, your support means the world over here. So thank you all for listening. We've got brand new episodes every Friday night. Keep those eyes open long enough to find those deep sleep videos, and of course, double features. Subscribe, tap the bell, and you'll never miss a thing. Big thanks to those who shared their stories, and a huge shout out to all of our patrons whom we appreciate so very much. Tracy S, Tamara K, Monica L, ZoeWatt, Chelle B, Donald C, The Dark Cosmos, Marion T, Rat Girl, Alisha S, Erin G, Nikki H, Mr. Revenant, Naz K, Brendon G, Paul T, Nicholas C, Lissane, Arlene F, and Adrienne. If you want to support The Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining my Patreon. Check out patreon.com/thedarkesthour or click the link in the description to learn more. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, amandadarkesthour@gmail.com, or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour YT. Stay spooky.